this next one, the question, why Genlab Alpha? Okay, so, when you pick something to run as a GM, there's a thought process that goes on to select it. And this one came from a few different levels. So, firstly, there was the interest in Free League publishing, Fria Ligan, from Sweden, and basically trying that mechanic system out, because I want to try and find a system myself that I can run some survival type stuff in, and maybe hack and do something creative with, maybe even write within at some point. And there are a lot of other variations on those mechanics. So I found this system out as one of them. And then the setting itself, alongside the system, seemed very evocative. That sort of post-apocalyptic thing. We all like Fallout, for example, and being able to play something similar to that. So initially, like a lot of people, it would have been found my way to it through Mutant Year Zero. Of course, there is the computer game for it, which is now bigger than the RPG, if search engine results are anything to go by, Road to Eden. And if anybody is looking to actually play the RPG as a player, I would suggest you probably don't play the computer game Road to Eden, because the whole RPG thing is about, oh my god, let's find Eden. So, spoiler, conflict, problem there. Okay, I haven't played Road to Eden yet, but hey, anyway. So I was initially looking at that, all ways to play Mutant. That's great, it's a great little solid mechanics. And then I find out that, there's these, it's a Unity RPG, so there's 3 others that support it in the same world setting. But then there are a lot of other RPGs that also use the same mechanics with very small variations on. And those variations can be, oh, well, we call this stat that stat. Or there are like multiple ranks of talents. Instead of you just take the talent, you can take the talent several times and gain like rank 2 of it and stuff like that. So different sort of variants on it. And I'm always interested in a different, unique kind of dice system as well, which is what drew me to Star Wars Edge of the Empire, for example, a while back. So it was the idea that with this dice system, the way it runs is it's predominantly D6s, and you roll as many D6s as you need. So like skills and stat. Skills are one color, stats another color, gears another color. You roll them all together, and 6s are successes, and those 6s mean you fail, and something bad potentially happens as well. And 1s don't mean anything unless you push your roll. And basically, all of your results that were 2 to 5 can be pushed, i.e., you re-roll those dice. Any that were already 1 or come up as 1 basically count as damage against that stat. So you damage that stat. But with the chance of creating more 6s. But the damages that you do to that stat always tend to create some sort of mechanical points, some sort of mana, if you like, yeah? Something to do your mutant powers with, or whatever powers with, or in the case of Genlab Alpha, feral powers. You fall back on the stuff you can do as an animal and pull that off, with a chance of then rolling on like a table and seeing if something else happens, and all these kind of things. So yeah, and it's another interesting mechanic system. And I liked the idea of the inventory system as well. The maximum of 10 slots on the character sheet, and then basically if it's not written on your character sheet, then you don't have it, it's lost. And it's just basically double your strength, because all the usual encumbrance rules on RPGs can be really horrible. And the way this is done is like, well, you know, item, it takes up a line, and you out of your max 10 lines on your sheet, you know, and they've specifically got 1, 2, 3 all the way to 10, and you just write an item in each line. Unless it's a light item, then it takes you can have 2 on the same line, and a heavy one takes up 2 lines. The only complication to that is tiny items, a whole bunch of things that could fit in the hand, and you can have like a however many number of them before you take up a slot. That's the bit where I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many. Maybe 40, is it? I don't know. I can't remember. See, as soon as you can't remember stuff, that's getting a little bit into the crunch there. And there are some things there that do get slightly a little bit more complicated. So it's like, oh, okay, the modifier for if I want to try and flee the battle and do the move thing, run away, modifier for how close I am to the enemy, or all the different modifiers that are in place for, in the case of Genlab, Alpha trying to do what do they call it? I haven't played the game yet, so I don't know all the stats. But a conflict of animal thingamy. I don't remember what it was called, but basically, you trying to display your animal superiority over another animal, and so you take all the other factors into account. So this is the kind of things it'd be great if you could have onto a GM screen, and we'll get to GM screens, of course. So, backtracking now, we found Mutant Year Zero. Okay, so let's get back on track. And, you know, from reading deeper into it, ostensibly, you have the core rulebook, and that's kind of it. And the way the system tends to work is like a hex map. So you roll on a chart, and you generate as you go. And you can set it in your home town and stuff. So I was thinking about it, and my thought process was, well, you know, I get to maybe overlay a hex, you know, outlay over a real location type of map, and then you can be inspired by what kind of ruins you're going to find in this post-apocalyptic setting. And there are a few little like pre-made areas that you can jump into. So Mutant Year Zero is the more supported one. But then I started looking at it and saw, oh, okay, so there's mutant animals that you can find out in the zone as well. And there's all these other things you can find out in the zone. But then I saw the storyline goes that, well, there was a point in the zone where mutant animals weren't there. They were back in Genlab Alpha or any of the other Genlabs, because, you know, this is just Alpha. There's going to be others, right? And basically the animals escaped, and that's how they got into the zone. So I thought, ooh, wait a minute. Now, me being a little bit OCD about things like this, I want to have things happen in the chronological order. So I thought, oh, well, really, the animal one should come first then. So I opened up the book and got the PDF copy of it, and opened up the book, looked at it, and realized, well, actually, it's not. It is just the rule book, and it doesn't have any extra add-on type stuff. So I probably want to run this as a quick campaign. It's basically like a prelude to a bigger Mutant Year Zero, and see how that works out, and like let the players kind of play these anthropomorphic animals. That would be cool. And it doesn't use the hex map system either. It's got like a fixed map inside the territory itself, and each time you leave a type of terrain, so each time you leave some forest and get back onto the road, or again, for instance, you'd roll for a possible encounter and see if one happens. And so yeah, the thinking was basically just run this as like a little prelude thing to actually getting around to doing Mutant. But, you know, looking at it, you know, even the Mechatron one, the robot one, seems great, and the other one seems great as well. So it would be, I think it would be short-sighted to imagine that I wouldn't want to try the others as well, if indeed these mechanics are as good as I believe them to be, essentially at their core for the kind of gameplay they deliver. And the other reason of picking it, mechanically speaking, was probably my biggest hang-up about RPGs is just the boring length of time that combat takes. And that's probably somewhat to do with having enough players in the party that are just not fast enough or experienced enough or whatever. But you've got this thing where when it comes to combat, RPGs, it's basically math hammer. You're throwing math at each other, to use the Americanism there, and you are trying to portray that as something RP. Take my maths, and that's basically what it is. And you can end up with just people at the table saying, "I do 37 damage." Well, I do 87 damage back in response to that 37 damage. Oh, good. Now you? I did 12 damage. So, yeah, I mean, you can get around that by trying to narrate the damage and the systems and things for doing all of that and blah, 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 blah. But still, the amount of rounds, it's still a thing, isn't it? It's an issue. It's a problem. And those rounds. And I've just so many times as a player through the past, and even as a GM, just sat there with frustration, thinking, "Wow, this is just taking ages because the players, I go to the point of, encouraging people to pre-roll their damages and all of that kind of thing as well, as much as I can. I always try to encourage that in my games, just because I'm so aware that energy is what you need in combat for an RPG. And it can wane really fast. And as soon as that happens, you're going to have bored players. Because I've played games that, campaigns and systems and things, D&D even, right? Where I've been into it and I'm invested, I'm interested, and I'm enjoying the story. But at that moment in time, it's taking so long to get back round to my turn. And nothing really interesting is happening in between for me to observe with anyone else, that, I'm sitting there and I'm bored. So it doesn't work really. Now, from what I can see about the Mutant Year Zero mechanics system, is it's fast, it's bloody, it's nasty, and it's over quick. And that's because it doesn't have a hit points value. So there's like a lot less checking that has to be done. You don't have to confirm a hit, for instance. There's no defense to roll against. There's no armor value to roll against. It is just I have to roll to hit, and I need at least 1/6 to hit you, no matter what you are. And then you can say, well, I now will do a roll to hit to try and parry you and give up my next hit to do that actively now as a response. And that's it, basically. And then the damage, every single one of those 6s is a you could stunt it to do stuff off, or you could just put it into pure damage. So when I say stunt it, Dragon Age RPG style, where you can say, well, additional successes after the first, you can do these other things with, narrate these other ideas with. I want to spend one of them to disarm the guy and one of them to do something else. But you could just pile them all on as damage, for example. And that damage doesn't come out of a hit points. It comes out of, for combat, it comes out of the strength stat. And those failures, like rolling those ones in a skill test that we were on about, when you push the roll, those count as like damage to whatever stat that is as well. So, for example, you could be thinking hard on a problem so much that you end up mentally broken for a period of time, and then you have to do the thing to recover that so that'd be your wits stat in the case of this. You'd have to do the thing that recovers that, which I think is sleep for wits. And it's all like basically you spend 4 hours doing the one thing. And for stamina, I think it's like eating, and dexterity is like drinking. And so an instinct is like whatever your animal behavior is, whatever type of animal you are, go off and be animal for a while, let that side come out. And yeah, I mean, it's a funny old thing because let's go back to combat. Yeah, so you might have a stat, and I think it maxes out at sort of 5 on all of the stats. And there's only 4 stats basically as well. I'm getting at here as well. And damage basically comes off of the strength stat, straight off of it. So you just make marks, and then you work out based on those marks, or minus whatever. You just write it up what your current strength is at, and it can be regained back up to its max by getting healed and doing whatever you need to do. But of course, if you get broken in stamina, strength, same deal. That is all there is. Strength, dexterity, wits, instinct in this game, in Genlab Alpha. If that goes to 0, then you're rolling on a critical table. And I don't know, it's that idea that you're taking immediately off the stat. It's quick, isn't it? Because if your max is 5, it's not like you've got high numbers here, and the amount of successes they're coming in, they might score, say, 3 successes against you, and they suddenly do all that damage, and you might have a stat of 3 or whatever, and you're broken. You're broken in one hit. It's done. At that point, you'd probably want to try to roll to give up your attack and try to do the parry thing and hope someone else is going to be able to help you. Or you might have talents that can override and let you do extra stuff. Because that's the thing. This game's got talents that you can pick. And essentially, you can get one shot from full health. And, that strength's down. So all the kind of strength skill tests you do, or strengthy type things you do, that's that minus modifier all the time you're doing them as well. So you get weaker as you go, unless you stop and put it all back up again. So this idea that combat can be really fast and brutal is right in my wheelhouse, because, that's something that absolutely needs to be addressed. Because combat is it's a frenzied, furious thing. And trying to portray that at the table, I think, is absolutely key. And it would appear that that's, what this is about. And from also tuning into a number of the podcasts, I've been following Sweden Rolls and checking out some of the other systems that they are playing. They predominantly play Forbidden Lands, which again is the same mechanics, but in a fantasy setting, goblins, elves, dwarves, yada, yada, yada. And it uses the same mechanics. But, there's others, there's sci-fi Coriolis, there's kind of Stranger Things-esque Tales from the Loop and Tales from the Flood. Tales from the Loop now becoming an Amazon Prime series, by the way. Hey, who knew? And more recently, the Alien RPG as well. And, by the way, Free League have, at time of recording, very, very recently, just been given the license to do Middle-earth as well. So, obviously, absolutely go ahead and just assume that is the same mechanics again that they're going to be employing. So, that's my thinking around the choice of this. And I've really tried to give you the full answers to that question. Why this RPG? And at first it looked more like, I was just going to cover this one because, it's a bit of background. But, the more I prep for it, the more interesting it looks. But I do like the idea that I can hurry the campaign along, because there are so many other kinds of RPGs out there to play, including now these mechanics, as I've illustrated. You don't want to spend a year in a campaign. So there are ways to speed these campaigns up. So things that you can, certain roles you can do that kind of create the state of play of the world. This kind of things you maybe only do usually once a session or once whatever. You slow the campaign down by doing those roles less, or speed the campaign up by doing those basically state of the world checks that move the environmental stuff all around you forwards until they come to a certain point at which plot-wise a thing has to erupt over. Yeah, and I like that. You know, it's not too intense. I can control the length of it somewhat. I can have the players maybe jump in media res on a few things. Just, you know, start them halfway along the trek if I want to, and or, you know, put them straight into an encounter that I've pre-checked for. Is there going to be encounter? Basically, skip all the boring stuff and boom, straight into it. I call it boring, but, you know, travel doesn't even have to be that. One great thing that Andreas does on Sweden rolls there, which I'm really inspired by, and I've read about it before, but having seen it done now, I'm really inspired to do it, and that is to have your players narrate the elements of the journey. So you could say, I don't know, you could say, well, there is a ship there in the bay. It wouldn't be for Genlab here because there's no water. And, you know, hey, describe the ship. You look to a player, what does the ship look like? Who's the captain? What kind of crew is it? That kind of stuff. You could just give the players the narrative power to do that and then ask another player to something else. Hey, we've come to a tavern. What's it called? And he's doing this. Of course, he's got really quality players. He's got actors there. So you know, being professional actors, they will be used to doing that as part of like the drama experience, ad-libbing, and the one thing we can all take away from professional actors basically doing improv is you always flow with what the other person said. You always say yes to it, or yes but, or yes and. So you if you're going to counter it, you don't just tip it up. You kind of roll with it, and you let their suggestion and element enhance what you do then in return, and all of that. So it'd be great to get into that as well. Yeah. So okay, that's why the choosing of it. Now there's other elements to explain, and we'll do that in other videos about the actual prep and all of that, and some of the practical things that I've had to do. So I will see you at those videos. Until then, well, I won't see you at the table because we're not there yet. So I'll see you in the hallway on the way to the table.